Let's create a basic component and describe its structure. Create a new component and call it app. Remove the default code. Import React, the use overrides hook, and the box component. The box component is similar to div. It has some styles and effects. Create the component. Output an empty box. And export it. When exporting, you can specify the component title and description. Now create an empty overrides object and add it to the export. Inside the app component, call the imported use overrides hook. It returns the override function used to describe the components. Replace props with rest that you got from use overrides. The component will contain 3 boxes: basic options, other options, and content with a list of countries. Describe these overrides in the object using the overrides you already have. In this case, specify the component type for all box components. Save and check. Everything works well. Let's add data by country. It's a CSV table that will be imported into the main component. Create the data component and add it to a pre-prepared table. You don't have to do it in a separate component. You can get data from the server or import it from npm. Export the table as a function that returns data. Then import it into the main component and call it getData. Save data in all countries as a string and parse it. Split them into separate lines and convert them into an array. The first line is the headers, the others are the values. The algorithm for getting the values is the same for all lines. Create an object with all received data for each country. Where the key is the data header, you get the value from the array. 2 types of value are available: number or string. We know what type of data is in each cell. That's why we convert the value into a number based on its number in the list. In all other cases, it is a common line. As a result, you get all table data as an array with the objects of the countries. Now return the resulting array. Output the data of each country in a new component. Create a new component and call it card. Import React, atomize the user overrides hook, and the box and text components. The text component allows you to edit text on a page. Atomize is syntactically similar to styled components. It allows you to use aliases and describe effects. It will be used in the components where there is no need to change the text. Let's add the span component using atomize. Create an empty overrides object which will be filled later. And create the card component. It will receive a number with user income and all other props. Call the imported use overrides hook inside the component. As a wrapper for the component, output the box where the rest will be transferred. The card will contain a header, content, and footer. Export the component. Don't specify the component title or description, because this component won't be used separately. Transfer just the overrides. Now add the overrides used above to the object. Add box to the header where the flag and country name will be displayed. Allow name editing but prohibit flag editing. Fill in the content and footer as you add the rest of the components. Go to the app component and import card into it in the same way as with the other components. If you don't want to display the entire table of all countries, import the use state hook and limit the current list of countries to year 2020. As a result, you get each country from the current list. Make sure that the current list isn't empty. Transfer income and country to the card component and add an override to it. If the list of countries is empty, output box with the text empty. Save. Since Windows doesn't have a set of emojis with flags, add an OS check and the ability to hide icons in the card component. To do that, add an override to the card country flag component. Save it. Now you can select a new override on the panel. Now let's calculate the number of burgers you can buy and display this value on the card. Just divide our income by the price of a burger. Output this value in the footer. To do that, add box to it. Then add a description that can be edited and the value. The description will be saved in an override with the specified name. If a user hasn't entered anything, the default text will be displayed. The value can't be edited, so output it to span. In the same way, output the cost and the number of burgers according to the income. Add to the object all overrides that we used in the footer. Before we move on to create an input field for user income, let's edit the code from the previous video. There's no need to transfer override unless you change it at some event or state. Let's create the field component where users can specify their income. Import React, the use overrides hook, and the box, text, icon, and input components. Create an empty object with the overrides and the component. It will take the default value and function to update the value, as well as all the other parameters. Call the use overrides hook. Only the wrapper will be displayed. Content will be added later. Export the component. Now let's add content to the component. It will contain text, input field, and an icon with a $sign. Describe them in the overrides object. Now add props to the icon. Overrides should always be at the end to allow users to rewrite the current values. You can specify an icon category. Specify the icon category, name, size, and color from the theme. Input will also get default values and the onChange event. Add some styles. Save and import it into the app component. Create a state for the income value. Add the imported component to basic options. Transfer the default value and the function to update the value. Specify the override. Specify the onUpdateIncome function. Now the user can change the income value. To do that, create a defaults object and add the income with a value of 100. Add default income to the state description and transfer the current value to the card. Save. Now you can have an input field with the amount of income, which will change all values in the cards. Now let's add an option to choose the year for which the current list of countries will be displayed. To do that, create a new component and call it range. Import React, the use overrides hook, and the box and text components. Create an empty overrides object, which will be filled later. Create the component and call it myRange. It will receive minimum, maximum, and default values, as well as a step for changing the year, a method for updating the current value, and the remaining props. Call the imported use overrides hook inside the component. Create a wrapper in the same way as for the previous component. Add a header and a slider to it. Import range and the getTrackBackground method from the React Range library. Now add the imported range with the minimum and maximum values. The component stores current values as an array, but will store them in state. Let's also add a step that will change the component. By default, we set 1. The onChange event is called when moving the slider and changes the component look. And the onFinalChange event is called at the end of the slider and transfers the final value. The updateValue function must take a specific value that you can get from an array. Next, add captions to the minimum and maximum values. To do that, add a box and 2 text fields in it with proper values. We export the component and transfer the overrides object, and all the overrides that you have already used for the overrides object. Save and go to the app component. Import range component. Add to the default values, minimum, maximum, and current year. In the countries, replace 2020 with the default value. Add a new state with a value and method to change the value in the same way as income. To make the system change the number of countries whenever the year is changed, import the useMemo hook. It allows the list of countries to be updated when the value of the year changes. Now add range to the box with the basic options. Save. Error. It occurred because the component imported from npm requires a mandatory transfer of functions that describe some of its internal components. Let's describe them. Go to the range component. Add the renderTrack function that describes the line. It takes its own props and children. The component will contain a wrapper and a decorative line of 2 colors. To the left of the selected value is blue, to the right, grey. Select the colors from the project theme. Get the default styles in the on-mouse down and on-touch start functions from the props. Add also an override for editing on the page. Add a decorative line of 2 colors to it. The getTrackBackground method gets 2 colors that you can take from the theme. To do that, import useTheme from the styled components and call it inside the component. And now we can take the colors from the theme. Transfer the current value of the slider. Add override in Children. In the same way, add the renderThumb function that sets the thumb. It will contain a wrapper and a decorative point inside. In the same way, add a track for minimum and maximum values. Save. Add all the overrides you used before to the object. Now add some basic styles. After adding the basic styles from the component, add custom styles. In the same way, get the styles from the component props and then add custom styles. Save. Despite the fact that props.style is listed separately in the documentation, there's no need to duplicate it. Now you can check how the slider works. Then create a component for sorting the list of countries and call it sort. Import React, atomize the user overrides hook and the box component. Add an empty overrides object as we did for the previous components. Create the component. It takes the current value, a function to change this value, the list of options to select the sorting type, and other props. Call useOverrides. Describe the component structure. Add label, select, and options into it. So let's create them using atomize. Add these components. Add the default value to the options array. Export the component and transfer the override. Add all the overrides that you already used to the overrides object. Save, go to the app component and import sort. Add the default sorting value and the list of options to the defaults object. Now add state with the current value and the function to change it. Add sorting to use memo. To do that, create a variable and add to it one of the functions for sorting. And call it when you get the current list of countries. Now let's add this imported component to the other options box. Save and check. All works perfectly. Now let's add an option for changing the sort direction. To do that, go to the sort component and import the icon component. To create an arrow button, we'll get the default direction value and the update direction function. Add icon and styles to change the arrow direction. Change the cursor styles to see if the component is active when clicked. Save and check. The arrow is added. Align it with the other components. Add a default value for the sort direction to the app component. Add state with the current value and a function to change it. The value depends on the previous state. Use callback to change it. Add a sort direction option in both sorting conditions. Add the default direction and update direction we used before to the sort component. Don't forget to add direction to use memo. Save and check. All works perfectly. Create a new component for filtering countries by name and call it filter. The structure of this component is similar to the sort component, so let's speed up the start of component creation. In the same way as with the card, define the OS used by the user. Add the select component. In the option component, output the country name with the flag on all OS, except for Windows because it doesn't have emojis with country flags. Add the label component. Add all the overrides that you already used to the overrides object. Specify styles for the alignment and cursor like for the sort component. Add a default value for the option list if no country is selected. Import this component to the app component. Add a default value and an option list. It will depend on the current year, so you have to create it manually. For now, just create an empty array. Add state with the current value and a function to change it. Then add two conditions, filter by year or filter by year and country name. Now create a list of options for selecting the country. It's an array containing the current country at the beginning, and all the other countries that year except the one we chose above. You need to get just 3 values: name, flag, and ISO 3 encoding. Add a filter value depending on use memo. Now let's add this imported component to the other options box. Save. Correct the typo in the condition. Specify the current value in select in the filter component. Save and check. Let's choose Australia as an example where there's data for 1988 but no data for 1987. Add a pop-up notification if the current country is not in the selected year. Create a component that will display the notification if there's no country for the selected year. Call it empty. Import React, the use overrides hook, and the box and text components. Then add an empty overrides object and describe the component structure. Export it. Don't forget to add an override. Save. Import the empty component into the app component. Add it instead of the current box. Save and check. Select Australia again. There's data for 1988 and a notification for 1987. All works perfectly. Correct the country card's look and add the burger list display. And remove the flags of countries that don't have emojis on Windows. Go to the card component. Set a limit to the maximum number of burgers to display. And if there are fewer burgers than the maximum value, the exact number of burger icons will be displayed. Otherwise, an icon with a digital value will be shown. Output this list of icons and transfer them to card content. The last icon will show the remains of a burger. To show it, cover it partially. Add all the overrides that you already used. add state to the flag for the Windows OS. Save. In the last part of this video, we'll add the components around the app. Title, description, images, etc. Add the box, text, link, and image components to the page. Turn box into a header, content, and footer. Let's create some links in the code editor to illustrate it. Then add the desired text and images. Ready! We've created a working application, described its structure, and added several third-party components. Now you can deliver it to a designer for them to improve how it looks.